March 8th, 2006, item number 133. Today's guests are Adam Curry and Ron Bloom from Podshow and Bill Rinehart from Limelight Networks.
Podcast411.com. Listen different.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Rob, and this is the Podcast 411 podcast. Before we get into the interview, and it is a really, really long interview, a couple of quick news and notes. First, as always, if you have any feedback during the interview, give us a call at 206-666-4357 or send audio feedback to podcast411@gmail.com. A couple of new prizes in the baby contest. If you're not familiar with the baby contest, send in your guess for our baby who is scheduled to be born on April 5th. Give us a guess on what day and time you think he will actually be born and his weight. And there's two winners. One for the closest to the day and time, the other to the closest to the weight. Tiebreakers on the weight are based on your guess for the day and time. The two new gifts in the prize pack are Trucker Tom shot glasses from Trucker Tom, and from Adam at Madtown Aces, the deluxe podcast packages. Adam does voiceover, bumper, trailers, promos for your show. Links in the show notes at podcast411.com can be found for all the prizes. I think for each prize package, the value is close to $1,000 for each winner. Tom and Adam, thank you for your donations to the prize packs. I need to warn you about today's interview. When I did this interview, it was via Skype. We had 5 people on the line, myself, Adam, Ron, and Bill's assistant, who actually isn't part of the interview. Adam was about 20 dB lower than Ron and Bill. In post-production, to raise Adam up, unfortunately, I raised up the background noise from Bill and Ron, one of whom was actually typing on their keyboard while Adam was talking. So I apologize for the background noise. I did separate and split the tracks, so my vocals sound pristine. However, when Ron and Bill and Adam are talking, you hear a lot of background noise that's been raised up so that you could actually hear what Adam is saying. Rule of thumb, anytime you're going to do a multi-person interview on Skype, I would highly recommend you get everybody's volume levels matched up as close as possible. Even if it means delaying for quite some time before you can get the interview up, you'll hear in this interview why that's important. So again, I apologize for the audio on this one. Also, this is a really long interview. This interview is 45 minutes. I was going to split this, but decided just to make it one show. Because of the length of the interview today, there will be no outro on the show. When the interview's over, the show will just end. So coming up on our next show, our guests will be Matthew Ebel and Laura Clapp. I interviewed them here this past Saturday before their concert in Kansas City. So come back on Saturday, March 11th for that interview. And speaking of Saturday, March 11th, for all the people in the Kansas City area, we'll have our next KC Podcasters meetup at Johnny's 119th and Glenwood, 4 to 6 p.m. Hope to see you there. Well, let's go ahead now and get right into the interview. Here we go. Adam, Ron, and Bill, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Adam, you've already answered this question, so I'm going to throw this one out to Ron and Bill only to start with, and that is, gentlemen.
Oh man, I don't get to do the computer question again?
No, you don't. You can ask, okay, you can say what your second computer was, but Ron and Bill, what was your first computer?
Well, it's Ron speaking. First, Rob, I really want to thank you for having me on the Actors Studio today, and very, very pleased to be here and talk about my career. My first computer was an Apple kit, and then I went on to build that and just blow that up and then into the early E-series of Apples back when they were hobbyist devices.
I haven't had an Apple kit before, so that is a first.
That's because I'm older than you, Rob. It was almost before electricity, but not quite.
And Bill, yourself?
I'll tell you, the first one that I worked on was a DEC VAX back in college. And so the first one I actually owned, it was a Chrome X86.
Now you're talking.
Sure. I was going to get some points for the DEC VAX.
Okay, Adam, I'll let you in. What was your second computer?
All right, so after the Sinclair ZX80, it was the Commodore VIC-20.
The classic VIC-20 and Duck Hunt.
Yeah, the big ROM modules you jam in the back.
So many Ks, so little time.
Now let's get into the Pod Show Delivery Network. There's been a lot, to say a lot, that's understating it, of talk in the forum boards. Ron, could you explain, or someone explain a little bit in more detail what really the PDN is going to be?
Well, sure. I'm going to start philosophically, and then as we get on forward, we'll talk to you a little bit more about the technology. But in order for podcasting, or actually any user-generated content, to be successful, it has to be deliverable on a platform that is equal to or superior to anything that the largest, most powerful media company in the world could put together. Because in the end of the day, the real customer is the audience. So we're in a world where the way that typical hosting works is that a successful show on a hosting system sitting on top of a questionable network, and Bill will get into what that means, the success of the show in subscribership could actually mean the demise of the show in listenership. As the show explodes, it gets either breaks, gets delivered too slow, can't be tracked or reported successfully, or simply is too expensive for the podcaster before they have any time to monetize. So at Podshow, what we try to do is three things, and I think it's pretty interesting to approach. One is we want to work with podcasters to turn user-generated content into media properties. We want our podcasters to be media properties and to look at themselves that way. Two, we want to help them develop their audience. We want to bond them to an audience. We don't want to leave it to them to get their audience. We want to contribute. And three, we want to market that relationship, the successful media property podcast connected to its loyal audience, to Madison Avenue. So to do those three things, we require a network that unlimited demand can be delivered with absolute guarantee of quality of service, and that's the goal of Podshow PDN.
Okay. Well, let's go back to item one there, and that's the creation of a media entity for that podcaster, basically their namespace, their brand. Really what you're looking at is a lot of individual brands that you're going to aggregate. Obviously, you're going to be pulling these individual brands out of the podosphere. They're already out there and created. As they become part of Podshow, what do they have to do? Do they have to change their namespace? Do they have to give away control of the URL? Or will they be able to maintain their current RSS feed?
Our mission is to let the podcaster maintain control of their property, ownership of their property. We want them to have the freedom to develop their property the way they see fit. But on the other hand, we want them to have this sort of incentives to determine if they want to commercialize their property. It's really up to them. If they want to commercialize it and become a media property, we want to constantly provide them with incentives and tools and processes to bond it to the audience tighter and to bring in higher quality marketing and advertising around it, and if they so choose, within it.
There's a couple of, I think you're basically asking about podcasters who will want to join the network and will migrate into the network. This is actually pretty cool because I'm going to be the first I'd say the first large audience podcaster to migrate into our own system, and I'm being a very, very typical podcaster because I know all the ins and outs of, and by the way, I have like 10 feeds myself, and all kinds of stuff is all over the place, incredibly long URLs, and nothing is consistent. So I think that I'm an excellent case, and I've laid this out before our team, which, geez, by now has grown to like 30 people. We have quite a little army working on this. So we have something within the network called the feed vacuum, which is for the easy part of the migration, which is basically getting your feed and your entries and all your content over, including your MP3 files, so you can import your legacy and your archives. And we have thousands of podcasters, knocking at the door. We just want to shore everything up and make sure that everything works. On top of that, we're integrating with domain name mapping. So, taking this by step-by-step order, you've got domain mapping, which of course is the ultimate way for anyone to control, their destiny, plan for success, and migrate seamlessly. We do do have a team who will be working as podcasters start to migrate, working with them on redirects. Many of them are on services that will provide redirects, but we really are going to recommend the domain, getting your own URL and mapping that to the system, which is of course the only way you truly can have 100% control of your content. So in the daily source code, I'll be talking about my own migration into the network. That should probably be happening next week. I'll be updating on that process. But it's a big one, Rob, as you know. It's a really big one. So I'm sure that there will be people with feeds in multiple places for a while as we move things in. But as you see the benefits of everything that we've created, and my gosh, there's quite a big chunk of functionality that we've put in primarily for listeners. And we've had about 20 or 30 podcasters now working through our beta program, really working to iron out all the wrinkles, and they've been just great. Providing feedback, living through the bugs, and we're taking this step by step. There's a lot of little things that we want to make sure are absolutely perfect, and we'll be bringing in more beta testers in the next few weeks, and we'll be opening it up, at hundreds first, and then we hope to open up wide by the beginning of Q2.
Now, how will it work with the vast number of podcasters that have a FeedBurner feed? Will it play fine with FeedBurner? If you have the FeedBurner feed, will you be able to keep that as your main feed in iTunes?
Well, we have a full service, including all the different variations of subscribing, iTunes, interestingly enough, Windows Media Player, Real Player for playback of pure playlists, and as those players come alive with podcast functionality, which we believe they all will, that'll all be automatically in there. People who want to stay or keep a feed with FeedBurner, they won't necessarily benefit from all of the reporting that they will be able to get on the Podshow PDN. But our goal, of course, is to make that part of the process and invisible and seamless as you migrate over. FeedBurner, by the way, has been doing some interesting things in their feeds, which seems to be kind of a moving target. So we're in discussions with them, and these are all things that are technical hurdles, and I call them hurdles because they're not mountains. And really, we're about focusing on the audience and providing tools for podcasters and listeners, or audience as we're calling it now, to be able to create an even better and even more interactive experience around a podcast.
Rob, it's Ron. I just want to stick my head in there. If Podcast 411 could help us do something, and depending on how you feel about that, is to educate the podcaster the importance of audience building, and almost every question, we have in our first 30 podcasters just the core beta group, which is now exploding, but the first 30, now when we have calls with them, they're actually asking a technical question, and there's always a comma at the end of the question, and it says, and how does that help me build my audience? Or how does that help me set up so that I can, build a tighter bond with my audience? And we're moving away from this sort of how does my feed work, or even the URLs questions are moving more into, how do I build my media property? How do I connect more strongly with my audience? What do I have to do to double my audience? What do I have to do to 10x my audience? And how can this technology help me do that? And that begets a really nice, a much wider, broader range of questions and more interesting responses that show the heart of what Podshow is trying to do with the PDN.
Well, I think what you're going to have, though, is you're going to have people that are afraid to join any network or anything if they give up control of their feed. this is the feedback I'm getting from podcasters, regardless of what someone may promise for potential audience, if they feel that they no longer have control of the namespace of their feed, if your feed is currently xyzshow.com/feed.xml, and all of a sudden now you have to change that and then migrate over all your listeners to a new feed, there's a lot of people that will just say, I'm not going to do that. And especially ones that have established audience. The larger their established audience, the less likely they are to make that change.
Well, Rob, again, the whole point of all these beta pod shows that we've had on the network so far is to work exactly through these issues. Again, you have control over your feed, you have control over your content, and people who already have a domain name mapped will be very happy because they'll be able to map that straight into our service so your URL will remain the same. If you want to opt out on the feed, that's fine. This is also an interface where you can create a new show in 2 seconds, one click of the button. New podcast. We have of all the beta podcasters who are in, most of them are starting to create new shows and are actually getting new listeners on the system already, and they see the value of really just being able to click a button and have a new one. All of these legacy issues, it's the same. It doesn't matter if you're migrating your email or if you're migrating your web server. There's all kinds of technical issues that are taken into consideration. And luckily, in RSS space, there are lots of solutions and redirects, and people at the Podcast Delivery Network will retain complete control over their feed, over their content, and over their site.
Okay, that's what a lot of people would like to hear, and that's just where I was trying to get to with the question, and it's just to hear if that was the case or not. I went to one site, and this is what it said in the top left-hand corner of the site, and it was for a ad network. It says, all you have to do is simply change your URL, and you can start using our network.
Well, so that's clearly not. Rob, I think that as a company, we've invested more money in assuring that all of these things are done right than any other company in this space. I mean, we've taken a long time. We should talk about Limelight in a second because this agreement that we came to was something that Bill and Ron spent probably about 6 months working on to really make sure that we could pull this off and we would have the right offering. And in that 6-month period, we've seen people pop up with all kinds of great offers. Things go nowhere. Things break. They fall off the edge. Some things seem to be working. We've learned an incredible amount just by paying attention.
You've teamed up with Limelight now, as you just mentioned. What does Limelight bring to the table?
In the podcasting world, with the way RSS works and the way subscribing works and the way feeds work and the way actual networks work in delivery, it's a little more complicated than people think because you have to be able to do it cost effectively. So we went on a search for a partner who had the high level end of experience, not in delivering web pages, but delivering large media files. And once you make the cut between web pages and large media files, the list gets very short. Because during the internet boom, the billions of dollars that were raised for networks really went to sort of Akamai-type companies who were focused on millions and millions and millions of requests for millions and millions and millions of little itty-bitty K files, where the economy, the mashup economy, the iPod economy is now creating millions of requests for very, very large files. It turns out that Limelight is really built from the ground up to deliver large media files to large audiences, and that's the beginning of the relationship. We spent almost 6 months, Bill, his team, and myself and our team, defining what podcasting could be on such a network, figuring out how to report against it, how to track against it, how to ensure its viability. But before I get there, I think, Bill, just tell us a little bit about, I think a lot of the podcast listeners would be interested in a little bit more about Limelight.
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about it. Ron did a very good job of kind of explaining what the synergies are between ourselves and podcasts, and really, I should say Pod Show. When you look at Limelight, we have the largest media delivery network in the world, and our customers are pretty much, in the United States at least, most of the mainstream media companies. So everybody from ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, Fox News, Virgin, those companies, we deliver their media over the internet. And when Ron and I started talking, what became very apparent to me was that what Podshow was looking for is the same thing that the large media companies were looking for, and that is the fact that they have two overwhelming requirements. First, the end user experience has to be second to none. In other words, it's what we call dial tone on the internet. It's got to be 100% perfect 100% of the time. So that was the first requirement that Podshow had. The second one was that it had to be able to scale. It wasn't enough to be able to say we can deliver thousands of Podshows. We want to be able to deliver then thousands, millions, etc. We deliver, just to put this in proper scale, we do somewhere between 10 and 15 billion deliveries a day for our customers, and these range in size from from songs to podcasts to games, etc. As an example of the other things that we do outside of straight media, we're the exclusive provider, for instance, for Xbox Live. And so really our three main focuses are music, videos, and games. And when you think of Podshow and podcasting, audio, video is the sweet spot, and so that's really our specialty.
What type of resources are you currently planning on dedicating towards just the Podshow side of it? I mean, how many gigabits per second switches do you see that you're going to need now, and are you ready to scale to a terabit per second switch in the future? Because when you start looking at half-hour video cache, you're looking at a 150 meg file. You're talking eventually, Podshow, I would imagine, will have tens of thousands of podcasts in it.
Let me answer that a couple different ways. I can tell you that our network has about 400 gigabits of capacity right now. Our goal is to get to a terabit by the end of the year. Right now, between ourselves and Akamai, which are the two largest networks in the world, we would argue that we are the larger of the two. We want to get to a terabit as soon as possible. To give you an idea of some of the other projects, when you talk about file size, like 150 megs, that is a very small file in Limelight's world. So when you look at the things that we do, Half-Life is a great example. Just the trailers for Half-Life are 500 megs. Now we're starting to deliver television shows. We're starting to deliver HD. So we've been contracted to start to deliver files that are in the 2 gig to 5 gig range. So from the standpoint that 150 megs, we maintain a certain amount of headroom in our network at all times. And while we understand that podcasting is going to be huge and it's a compelling technology, it is not something that will challenge the size of our network. I mean, if you look at something like Hurricane Katrina, we went from 0 to 30 or 40 gigs with MSNBC. So it would have to be something on the scale of a 911 in order to really challenge our network at this point.
I want to make sure, Rob, you understand that difference, that the podcasters understand the difference of a massive, scalable, multi-user, interactive, super large. Like when I first met with Bill, it's very interesting that Adam and I went down to the headquarters of Limelight Networks, and we're coming down there with that train of thought, which is, man, this many gigabytes, 20, 50, 100, whatever, megabytes, this much speed, this much size, and by the time we left, we realized that what we think is large is for him is quite small, and what we think is demand for him is quite manageable. And I don't know how deep you want to get into the technology of how it works, but there is a difference between a network, like we believe that there's a difference between a network that's built from the ground up to be the dominant user-generated media network on the planet, and we also think there's a difference in a network that's built from the ground up to be the dominant delivery network for large media files. So it's why we work so hard with Limelight to kind of figure out how to come together on this, is because we think there's almost just no alternative that is this powerful.
If I can just add to that, Rob, for a second. Ron and I went down on our initial visit to Arizona, which is where Limelight's headquarters are. And I have to say that, besides, we were there with, big spreadsheets and exactly as Rod said, we were already calculating, how is this going to work? What is the actual cost? and we had met with other very large networks and providers, and just these guys they're like us. We all kind of walked in rather casual, I might say, and we connected at a philosophical level. We listened. We learned an incredible amount. We ran all kinds of tests through 3 major networks. And we were just so convinced and so philosophically connected to Bill and his team, because we all kind of we all kind of see life the same way, and I think that we certainly, if we look at the overall media landscape, mainstream media included, I think we're renegades that could be pretty powerful to upset some apple carts.
Let me get back into here, and I want to talk a little bit about listeners and getting listeners. And what are you planning? What is your strategy for bringing in listeners from outside the podcasting community? Because obviously, as you know, and you've mentioned before, Adam, you think in 2 years we're going to get to 100 million listeners. It's key about bringing those 80 to 90 million people that aren't currently listening in. And what's your strategy on that?
Well, we have a number of strategies, and I'd like Ron to jump in a second. But that has always been our focus, and that's pretty important. That we remember that we're here for listeners. That is the one thing that is needed. That is what, at the end of the day, that's what the game is about. And it's about giving people something they really want. You're not locked into channels with podcasting. You're not locked into places or devices that you can listen or watch, enjoy podcasts. So we're going to have to, work on innovative ways and multiple strategies to bring the audience in. Because you're absolutely right. The total U.S. population that even has MP3 capabilities or mobile MP3 capability is quite low. I think the people who know that you can play a podcast on your computer is likely even lower than that. So there's plenty of work to do, and this is really what a network does. If we bond together and we all work towards a common goal, then I believe it is absolutely possible. We have some, top-line strategies. Maybe, Ron, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think that it takes 5 things to make the network valuable. One is the delivery has to be bulletproof. It has to be seamless, dial-tone style, as Bill referred to. The second thing is the first listens have to be great. The first listening experiences, even if they're not in the genre that you're looking for, even if you haven't narrowcasted or dug down, the first listens have to be great. Third, we have to remove 100% of the hurdles of understanding how to get, what to get, how to subscribe, should it be called subscribe or whatever. 100% of the listener hurdles. That's number 3. Number 4, we have to provide for an ever-increasing quality of feedback. And the final one is to take that feedback and evolve the medium. So make the network bulletproof, make the first listens great, remove the technical hurdles, provide for feedback, and use the feedback to be more productive, and we have a real medium.
Now let's talk about a podcaster that's looking at joining the network. And you didn't create this great network to just give away bandwidth because you guys are nice and friendly. Obviously, you're going to want to make something. Now, there's going to be some quid pro quo. What is it that the podcaster has to do on his end who joins PDN?
Well, first of all, understand that the PDN is going to be available for anyone to use, either on a independent basis, from which we would just come up with a fee for them and they can go off and do their own world, or for mainstream media companies who want to get more aggressively into what we call real, quote-unquote, podcasting. That PDN had to be good enough and strong enough and powerful enough to handle any level user, so that's out there. The third category is how can we use PDN to promote the growth and success of independent podcasters who really want to turn their user-generated content into media properties. And we're going to be giving them several different ways to join the network. We'd like to invite them all in and give them kind of no-cost way to be able to build their media properties with us and give them a taste of what it means to work on a network where the network promotes them and they in turn contribute to the network. All of the details of that will be sort of leaking out or being released here over the coming probably 30 days. We have we're moving towards 100 or so podcasters that are sort of experimenting with the network now as we refine the details. And I think we have several thousand that are kind of queued up kind of one end. So I believe we're going to be able to make and come forward with the single most compelling offer, kind of an easy start, easy growth offer that enables podcasters to focus on what we think that they should focus on, increasing the frequency and quality of their content.
Let me just summarize from what you said and correct me here if I'm wrong. You're going to have an option if someone wants to pay per, and they'll be able to pay for the service to use PDN. Mm-hmm. Or they're going to be able to use PDN in exchange for playing an advertisement from an advertiser that you are going to supply them if they don't want to pay. Is that kind of...
what I would like to do is get your head out of sort of the AdSense model, right? Well, so yeah, let me just go forward a little bit and see if I do it. Yes, a podcaster will be able, or a company will be able to hire the services of the PDN. So that's the easy one. The B is that AdSense created a multi-billion dollar valuation for one company and a very small stream of income for 10 million other companies. Very, very kind of small. What AdSense relies on is the big company's ability to track relevance, loosely speaking, or tightly speaking, to track relevance. Podshow is exactly 180 degrees opposite. Rather than taking 5 billion web pages and tracking relevance to be able to get down to 500 or 50 suggestions, we need to take 5,000 podcasts and get them out to 100 million people. So instead of tracking relevance, we have to create relevance. And Adam and I were down in Google for one of our many visits a couple of weeks ago, and when we made this distinction, they got it very, very clearly, which is why we're exploring many ways to work together. So creating relevance, the podcaster that comes into Podshow's network needs to have an expectation that we're going to work together to build their audience, that we're going to work together to build podcasting's audience, and that we're going to reward them. Sometimes we just reward them simply for audience building without advertising. There's many financially. There's many different ways that they're going to have to access revenue and to quit their day jobs. So I don't want you to get stuck with everything has to come because of advertising. And I'm not going to release all the information, but we full well know that we've made a promise out there to show podcasters how to make this into a business for them. And we're taking that very seriously, and simply inserting ads is just not enough. So we think it's going to be a much larger scale of contribution.
Now, when you say quitting your day job, the median income in the United States is $44,000 a year, at least in 2004. But let's just say $45,000. What type of audience do you foresee a podcaster needing to get to the point in PDN to generate $45,000 in revenue so they can quit their day job?
All right, now you're starting to get to some interesting questions. I would say, what type of media property do they have to become to magnetize themselves to $40,000 worth of earnings? So some of that might be that they need to increase their frequency. Some of that might be that they need to tighten their format to speak to a smaller audience because they're close to something where an advertiser really wants to zero in on. Some of that may need to mean they triple their audience. Some of that may need to mean that they export segments of their show to be played in other shows. When you look at it as a media property, where you fail is you go, if you take it as a given that podcasting in its current format says, I'm great, I can't get any better, stick an ad in or I'll give you an endorsement, you're pretty much guaranteeing that no one's going to do anything. The only people who will win there is people who stumble upon large audiences. To become a media property is to understand where high volume, high value advertising lives and to magnetize yourself to that. Madison Avenue, they're telling us, look, we love the idea of podcasting. Here's what we need to be able to do to invest some of our $30 billion of radio budget, to invest some of our $15 billion of digital budget in this market. And we have a pretty good idea of what that is and what relationships are. So when you join the podcast network or the Pod Show network, you're going to be joining a team that's I think we have Chris and 3 guys in New York this week, just finishing up a week-long Madison Avenue trip. So we're coming loaded with opportunities. Our mission for Madison Avenue is not to blow them. So we have to constantly refine the groupings of podcasts. We'll have programs that extend across 1,000 pod shows. We'll have programs that extend across 1 pod show. We'll have 50 pod shows making something that shows up on 100 more. It's really much more exciting, Rob, than just sort of, okay, I got a show, stick in an ad. If we don't proceed that way, then the millions of dollars that we've raised and are investing and the millions of dollars that Bill's company is putting in and all the work that we're doing will fail.
Ron, I want to continue on something that you had started discussing with Heather back in December. It's relevant because today, this is Friday, March 3rd. Today there was a little forum string going on the Yahoo Podcasters group, and that has to do with CPM rates. And you had said in the interview with Heather to not even think about it in view of a CPM rate, yet everybody seems to get locked in this. Is it $15 or $25? Is that a good CPM? Is that too low? Is it $100? When you're talking to the advertisers about podcasting and the opportunity in these Madison Avenue people, are they able to get their mind unlocked from CPM and to think about it in a different way?
CPM is a measurement that comes from a media world called broadcasting. In broadcasting, the value in broadcasting is called audience measurement. To the extent that a podcaster emulates the broadcast value, then they only believe in audience measurement. Social media or podcasting or user-generated content that connects on a more emotional and ethereal level, host to podcaster to audience, host to audience, this is called relationship measurement. In relationship measurement, you completely bypass CPM and you get into something completely different. So how the heck do you measure relationships? Well, that's why we're together. That's why Limelight Networks and traditional reporting and podcasting and sort of traditional media reporting don't work independently. You have to come together, be able to understand the strength of the bond of the host and the audience. You have to characterize that bond, which is, I think, intellectual property to some extent, and then you have to represent that to Madison Avenue. I will say that we have talked to, for those people out there in podcast land that don't understand how media buying and planning works, we have talked to repeatedly $15 to $25 billion worth of combined yearly radio and internet advertising. Forget television, because we also talk to them. And there is far more money available there's enough money available for the vast majority of professional podcasters to either absolutely supplement their current income or to quit their day jobs based on your media. And that money is out there. It's out there. It won't be gotten through CPM. Give me 5 years, and or 3 years, there'll be some sort of arithmetic metric. All right, but today, the podcaster who attempts to validate themselves or do an auction based on that is really putting a noose around their own neck that they don't have to put.
So you think the $40,000 per week deal that Rocket Boom did was a good deal or a bad deal?
I think Rocket Boom, rather than saying it's a good deal or bad deal, I think Rocket Boom is a really, really good media property. And I think that a week of advertising for $40,000 is something to talk about. However, I would rather personally look at our media properties as going, where does this property want to be in 2 years? Does it want to be a $100,000 a year media property? Or does it want to be $1 million a year media property? Or does it want to be a $50 million a year media property. And how do you get there? I think that the team at Rocket Boom has a very, very specific plan for themselves about where they want to be and how they want to get there. We talk to them all the time. Nice product. You'll probably see us coming to market with a little bit different strategy, but that's a good one.
Now, let me ask this. Is there anything about PDN that I haven't asked that you'd like to go over?
Just one point I want to make is that content delivery networks and the PDN is not about being a hosting company. Bill, you may want to talk about how the differences between like a hosting company and network storage, and let's just make sure we get that out to people who might be interested.
No, absolutely. The major difference is you don't have any points of congestion using a CDN like ours. So what we've done is we've taken the content that we get from Podshow and we replicate that not only in multiple servers within a location, but also multiple servers around the world. So, and the way that our network works, it works through a technology called link popularity. The more popular the object, which is a podcast, the more times it's replicated throughout the network to alleviate any congestion. So we guarantee 100% uptime, 100% delivery. And so you're never going to reach a point where your show becomes, quote, too popular for your own good, if you will. We have basically, in terms of what Ron and Adam and folks are doing, we have unlimited capacity to throw at this. One of the things that might be interesting, Adam, for you to touch on is some of the reporting that we're customizing for your specific application, the kind of reporting that not only Podshow gets themselves, but you can pass on to users, or I should say podcasters.
Yeah, and there's actually a nice little team working on exactly that. There's some basic reporting that everybody is used to. What I like so much about Limelight when we went to visit them the first time around, what really blew me away is their real-time reporting. And above and beyond that, we have full access to, so there's an entire API. We can create new types of reports if we see the need for them, or if there's demand for them, or if there's something that pops up that we hadn't thought of. We can make those standard reports for every producer within the network. We can correlate those with the actual log files to give you like a weekly extrapolated report that really explains what's going on with your audience. There's things that are happening on the network, things that are happening within the industry. There's trends, all types of issues crop up. Really, Limelight has all the bases covered on the reporting structure. It's more detailed than I've ever seen, and even people who've been working with Limelight today outside of the PDN, I've talked about just how much effective it makes it for campaigns, what opportunities looking at the right stats can give you at the right drafts, and we're going to provide a layer over that reporting, which will really give you the relevance to help you understand what's happening with your show, with your audience, and again also give you some real comprehensive data that you can use. So I'm really big on that, and that's something that always seems to come at the end of this type of a project, but this was pretty much there from the beginning. I'm real excited.
Yeah, so I think if you look at it, this is Bill again, the combination of what Ron and Adam created and what we've been working on for years truly does level the playing field from the standpoint of, the fact that a individual podcaster has the access to the network, the tools, the marketing, et cetera, of any large media company. So, so they're just the same way we're serving CBS or NBC or ABC's content, that's the same way it's going to be served with the combination of the PDN.
So, I think what I hope you can hear is that we're trying to do is, you talk about message boards and whatnot. I don't see near enough messaging about what podcasting as an industry, if you will, or actually independent podcasting can do for each other to compete with the real competitor, which is not my podcast versus yours or something versus Podshow, but is how do we cobble together this network professionally enough to undermine the rest rest of the industry. Musicians absolutely get it. They take no convincing. Musicians have their own personal desires. They're as greedy or not greedy as anyone, but the greed doesn't manifest itself in mistrust. They're out there giving feedback. They're out there trying to make things happen because they've already been through the mill. They've been churned and burned, and they know that this is the only way. You have to be able to absolutely create every component of a media enterprise in order to displace the enterprise that exists.
Gosh, Ron, you are so right about that. I mean, you see the PodSave artists, how they're bonding together virtually and geographically, and the promotion engine they turn on just as these individuals, turning people onto podcasting, not just independent music. It really is an example to look towards.
Adam, not to get you too jealous, but I'm here in Kansas City, so tonight and tomorrow night, Matthew, Ebel, and Laura Clapper.
Yeah, I know. That's the show I really would have gone to, dude. You know it.
Yeah, I've already emailed Matthew, and I'm trying to set up an interview with him and Laura tomorrow, so we're trying to work out the times right now, and then I'm going to go see the show tomorrow night.
Yeah, get me some pictures of Laura. I want to see some non-style.
I 100% plan on bringing my camera. Two podcasters that are out there that are trying to make their podcast into a media entity, what advice would you like to offer to them, or what would you like to say to them don't do that you see some of them doing that is a mistake?
I got an email. It's funny how message boards work and things, but we get a lot of emails directly from podcasters here. I got a beautiful email from a podcast that we work with that has gone from virtually no subscribers to hundreds of thousands of downloads a month simply because we got them into the network and fixed their delivery. We haven't even begun to influence what they can really become. And the email said, Pod Show, thank you. You let us do what we do well, which is be creative and go make great programming, and you help us do the other things which we don't have that much experience in. In all of the media experience I've had in my life, I would say that to try to do everything yourself, to look at a sort of a auction off your talent and try to do everything yourself on a short-term plan is one way to approach it, but really to decide what you're good at and then surround yourself with others who are good at the other part, whether it's Pod Show or somebody else. And in order to compete effectively with mainstream media, you're going to have to do it as a team with a multi-year strategy as opposed to an independent person, with a one-month strategy.
And I'd like to remind your listeners, Rob, and I know that we've talked about this in the past, Ron and I, and I definitely include Bill in this, we all in our lives have battled against all the restraints that podcasting as a creative medium have liberated us from. I mean, literally even liberated us from having to hit the network news at the top of the hour. Bill built a network that has liberated him from the status quo of what delivery was supposed to be. Ron has been, although he has traded a lot of his creative time to help build this company to give other people creative time, is also liberated. And when he gets his Mac working again, then he'll start contributing to the PodSave Music Network. This is a dream that we had when Ron and I first met 12 years ago. This is what we believed would happen. This is what we always dreamed about. Didn't know exactly how or when. We thought it would happen much, much sooner. So the whole point here is to make it work. And we really are working against the incumbents here, who are very powerful, very cash rich still, and we have work to do. And I just cannot stress how excited I am, and I know my partners as well, to be doing this and to be cracking this nut open. It doesn't happen overnight, but I think that we're taking all the measured steps that have been thought through quite carefully.
Well, gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you again for having us in the Actors Studio.
Yeah, thank you very much.